This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Mcgovern.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. On Capitol Hill, President Trump's nominee to head the CIA, Jena Haspel, announced she would not restart the CIA's interrogation program. But she repeatedly refused to call the CIA's post-9/11 treatment of prisoners torture and declined to state whether she believes torture is immoral. Haspel's comments came in testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee as she made her case to become the first woman to head the agency. Haspel is a 33-year CIA veteran who was responsible for running a secret CIA black site in Thailand in 2002, where one prisoner was waterboarded and tortured in other ways. Haspel also oversaw the destruction of videotapes showing torture at the black site. This is Democratic Senator Kamala Harris of California questioning Haspel.
Do you believe that the previous interrogation techniques were immoral?
Senator, I believe that CIA officers to whom you referred.
It's a yes or no answer. Do you believe the previous interrogation techniques were immoral? I'm not asking do you believe they were legal. I'm asking do you believe they were immoral?
Senator, I believe that CIA did extraordinary work to prevent another attack on this country, given the legal tools that we were authorized to use.
Please answer yes or no. Do you believe in hindsight that those techniques were immoral?
Senator, what I believe sitting here today is that I support the higher moral standard we have decided to hold ourselves to.
Can you please answer the question?
Senator, I think I've answered the question.
No, you've not.
Jena Haspel's confirmation hearing was repeatedly interrupted by anti-torture protesters.
The question is, what do you do to human beings in U.S. custody? Bloody Jena! Bloody Jena! Bloody Jena! Bloody Jena! You are a torturer! Bloody Jena!
Another protester who interrupted Haspel's hearing was retired 27-year CIA officer Ray Mcgovern. In dramatic video posted online, police can be seen dragging the 78-year-old Mcgovern out of the room, throwing him to the ground and dislocating his arm.
Stop resisting.
I'm not resisting.
Yes, you are.
No,
Give me your arm. Give me your arm.
I'm lying on.
Give me your arm.
It's dislocated, man.
Give me your arm.
My left arm is.
Give me your arm.
My left arm is dislocated. Damn it!
Give me
Don't
your
you
arm.
understand?
Stop hurting him.
I'm trying to stand. My left arm is. Ah!
Hold on. Stop fighting.
I'm not fighting. I'm on the ground.
Hold on.
And if you let me get my glasses on, I can see what's happening.
You're hurting him.
You guys are hurting me.
Stop hurting him.
I'm immobilized. I'm immobilized. You're going to dislocate my shoulder again. And look, would you pick up my glasses before you step on them?
A lawyer who spoke to Ray Mcgovern in jail said he's being held overnight and faces arraignment this morning. Ray Mcgovern, long-time worked for the CIA, one of the top briefers for President George H.W. Bush years ago. On Wednesday night, President Trump tweeted, "Jena Haspel did a spectacular job today. There is nobody even close to run the CIA," he tweeted. But at least two Republican senators have come out against Haspel, Rand Paul and John McCain. McCain said her, quote, role in overseeing the use of torture is disturbing, and her refusal to acknowledge torture's immorality is disqualifying. But Haspel may still be confirmed with the help of Democratic lawmakers. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia has already announced he'll back Haspel. For more, we're joined by Jeremy Scahill, co-founder of The Intercept, host of the weekly podcast Intercepted, author of the books Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army, and Dirty Wars, The World is a Battlefield, and the Oscar-nominated film Dirty Wars. Jeremy, welcome back to Democracy Now! Talk about what happened yesterday and talk about Jena Haspel's record.
Well, first of all, I think that if we look at the fact that we're 17 years removed from 9/11 and we look at how this country has not come to terms with all of the acts of torture, kidnapping, extrajudicial killing that was done with the veneer of legalism put over it by very creative, albeit creative in a sort of evil way, lawyers in the Bush administration. what has resulted in not holding those torturers accountable is that one of them is now ascending to the highest post in the CIA. And, you know, Amy, the CIA is generally prohibited from engaging in operations inside of the United States and also prohibited from engaging in propaganda aimed at the American people. And yet, to me, this whole Jena Haspel nomination really seems like a CIA operation itself. You know, the CIA throughout history, from its origins, and this was the case with its predecessor, the OSS, has had a mastery of coups and interventions and interfering in affairs of other nations and waging propaganda battles. Jena Haspel, when she was nominated for the CIA, was the recipient of an enormous amount of support from the CIA's social media accounts, Twitter and others. And it was a propaganda campaign that was aimed at all of us, at the American people. It was aimed at lawmakers. It was aimed at journalists, where they sort of tweeted and they did it over and over and over. And they even did it once Haspel was technically in charge of the CIA, where they're giving her biography, making her sound like some combination of like Lara Croft Tomb Raider with Jack Bauer. I mean, it was really kind of incredible. And then they selectively, the CIA, declassified documents, including one from a Hillary Clinton supporter, Mike Morrell, the former acting director of the CIA, that sought to exonerate Jena Haspel of any wrongdoing in the destruction of the CIA tapes, pinning all of the blame on her boss, Jose Rodriguez. The reason I'm bringing all of this up is because Jena Haspel has been embraced by Republican and Democratic nominees. Everyone from John Brennan, who was sort of Obama's killer priest. You know, they always said, oh, John Brennan, it's like he's like priest-like. He has this great conscience. This man ran a global assassination program. Michael Hayden, Bush's former CIA director, I actually respect his intellectual honesty because unlike Brennan and Clapper and others, Hayden says, I support torture, and torture works, and that's part of why I support Jena Haspel. What we saw yesterday was a CIA propaganda operation. Jena Haspel's answers were very carefully prepared, the way she refused to answer Kamala Harris's questions about the immorality of torture. And, you know, one of the things I found was astounding was she said the CIA has historically not been in the business of interrogations. What on earth is she talking about, and why wasn't she pressed on that? I believe that what she was doing was relying on a technicality, which is that the CIA traditionally outsources those interrogations, or they will have people like the mental health professionals, Mitchell and Jessen, who were essentially the ones that came in and said, here's how we can reverse engineer the tactics that we use to train our own personnel to resist torture or to face torture. Let's reverse engineer that and actually apply it in an offensive manner against prisoners. So the fact that this hearing was a farce, where unfortunately some of the Democrats and all of the Republicans engaged in a collective endorsement of what is, in my view, quite clearly a CIA propaganda operation. It's a coup of sorts to have someone like Jena Haspel, who has been involved with destroying evidence, torture, kidnapping, and refuses to denounce any of it. I mean, it's incredible that 17 years after 9/11, and I'm sorry, Obama plays a huge role in how this happened. The moment Obama said we need to look forward, not backward, was the moment that Jena Haspel was able to become a viable candidate for CIA. And I mean, this is a very, very serious development and the result of a probably extra-legal propaganda campaign and an operation aimed at the domestic American public.
Well, I want to go back to who you mentioned, Democratic Senator Kamala Harris of California, questioning Jena Haspel at Wednesday's hearing.
Would you agree that given this appearance of conflict or potential conflict around the classification or declassification of these documents, would you agree that Director Coates instead should have the responsibility for declassification decisions regarding your background?
Senator, I think one important thing is that this committee plays a unique role to review the classified record. And we have sent over every piece of paper we can lay our hands on about my classified record. all of my evaluations over a 33-year career. And I hope every senator has had the opportunity to look at that classified material.
Indeed, I have.
But
and
there
I
are
have another question for you then, because I only have a few minutes left. I only have a few seconds left. The president has asserted that torture works. Do you agree with that statement?
Senator, I don't believe that torture works. I believe that in the CIA's program, and I'm not attributing this to enhanced interrogation techniques, I believe, as many people, directors who have sat in this chair before me, that valuable information was obtained from senior al-Qaeda operatives that allowed us to defend this country and prevent another attack.
Is that a yes?
No, it's not a yes. We got valuable information from debriefing of al-Qaeda detainees, and I don't think it's knowable whether interrogation techniques played a role in that.
Jeremy, if you could respond to what Jena Haspel said, and also elaborate on what exactly she was responsible for at that CIA black site in Thailand.
Well, the CIA black site in Thailand was called Cat's Eye, and at the time, Jena Haspel was. I mean, they describe her as a mid-level officer in the CIA, but let's remember this was the most closely guarded, sensitive program of the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And they chose Jena Haspel. The CIA chose Jena Haspel to be in charge of one of the main black sites that the CIA was using when they would either kidnap individuals. I mean, they call it rendition. It's kidnap. When they would kidnap individuals, purchase them from warlords, or receive them from allied forces either in the Middle East or in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And her job was to oversee the interrogation, the debriefing, as she puts it, of prisoners that were snatched off the battlefield. And the rationale for it was, A, we need to find out who knows what about how 9/11 happened and who planned it, and B, are there more attacks planned? And if you remember at that time, 17 years ago, there was a lot of concern that there was going to be another attack. There was the whole anthrax thing going on. I mean, there was real hysteria. So that is the part of it that at yesterday's hearings, everyone put the focus on. It was like, let's remember what was going on at that time. So Haspel is sent there, and my understanding is that prior to her arriving there, there was some extreme torture used against prisoners. And then during her time there, what they've publicly acknowledged is that at least one individual was waterboarded dozens and dozens of times.
Slammed against a wall.
Well, I mean, the whole focus has been on waterboarding. And Jena Haspel yesterday said, well, I will follow the U.S. Army Field Manual, which has been on the books for a long time and remains on the books, of what DOD personnel are allowed to do during an interrogation. And that includes extreme sleep deprivation, sensory deprivation, putting people in very confined spaces. I mean, they would put people in boxes. The CIA would. They sometimes would place inside of those boxes insects and tell them they were poisonous. They would do walling, where they would have a chain on one side of the wall. The prisoner is attached to that chain on the other side of the wall with a hole in it, and they could yank them and then slam them against a wall. And then you had, of course, waterboarding. Now, the question was, is this immoral? And Jena Haspel kept saying, well, it was legal. There's no record that Jena Haspel protested, expressed concern, and there is a record that at other sites, and in fact at that site later, that interrogators did sort of rebel and say, wait a minute, are we really supposed to be doing this? I mean, as Trump became president, I've spent a lot of time over the past year and a half studying World War II and the aftermath of World War II. And of course, everyone has heard of the Nuremberg Trials, where the Nazis were put on trial, and it was everyone from very high-ranking people all the way down to lower-ranking people. In fact, very recently, in the past years, the Israelis and the United States have both tried to apprehend people that were guards at facilities, people that weren't even accused of directly killing anyone. And the Nuremberg principles dictate that saying you were just doing your job is not a defense. And yet, that is the primary defense of Jena Haspel. And Amy, final point on this. In Japan, after World War II, the tribunal was called the Tokyo Trials. And yes, they prosecuted very top-level people. They also prosecuted, as U.S. prosecutors, they also prosecuted Japanese soldiers for waterboarding American POWs. And I read the primary testimony of some of those soldiers. Ted Kennedy, actually, in 2006, on the floor of the Senate, read some of the testimony of American soldiers who had water sprayed up their nostrils, doused on their faces. Some of those people were executed, and among the charges they were executed for was waterboarding, not solely waterboarding, but waterboarding was one of the main charges. And others were sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. What's Jena Haspel's sentence? Oh, to be nominated as Central Intelligence Agency Director.
So let's go to Jack Reed, the Democratic senator of Rhode Island, questioning Jena Haspel.
If one of your operators were captured, subjected to waterboarding and enhanced interrogation techniques, which you, I believe, supervise, would you consider that to be moral, since perhaps the other entity did not have legal restrictions, and good tradecraft, as you appeared to do when you were involved in it previously?
Senator, I don't believe the terrorists follow any guidelines or civilized norms or the law. CIA follows the law.
Excuse me, madam. You seem to be saying that you were not following civilized norms and the law or anything else when you were conducting those self-same activities, if that's the analogy you're going to draw.
Senator, I'm sorry, can you I can't.
Very simple. You have an operations officer who is captured. He's being waterboarded. I've asked you very simply, would you determine that to be immoral and something that should never be done, condoned in any way, shape, or form? Your response seems to be that civilized nations don't do it, but uncivilized nations do it, or uncivilized groups do it.
The United States does it.
A civilized nation was doing it until it was outlawed by this Congress.
Senator, I would never obviously support inhumane treatment of any CIA officers.
And let's turn to Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine questioning Jena Haspel.
As a candidate, President Trump repeatedly expressed his support for waterboarding. In fact, he said we should go beyond waterboarding. So if the CIA has a high-value terrorism suspect in its custody, and the president gave you a direct order to waterboard that suspect, what would you do?
Senator, I would advise, I do not believe the president would ask me to do that.
So Jena Haspel doesn't believe that the president would ask her to do that. This is Donald Trump while he was running for president.
Don't tell me it doesn't work. Torture works, okay, folks? Torture, you know, I have these guys. Torture doesn't work. Believe me, it works, okay? And waterboarding is your minor form. Some people say it's not actually torture. Let's assume it is. But they asked me the question, what do you think of waterboarding? Absolutely fine. But we should go much stronger than waterboarding. That's the way I feel.
I would go much stronger than waterboarding, says President Trump. Jeremy Scahill.
You know, my question for anybody watching or listening right now is when you hear the phrase speaking truth to power, you know, who do you think of? You think of people like Martin Luther King. You think of, you know, activists. You think of people of conscience. That is the phrase that lawmakers, you know, the people that introduced her, former CIA directors, they say, Jena Haspel is the person that you want speaking truth to power. And there's this sort of hashtag resistance view of Jena Haspel that exists, which is, well, Haspel already knows all of this stuff. She understands. She's been in the CIA for 30 years. She's going to be able to sort of do that dance with Trump and stand up to him. No, we already know how she views these. There were people that were interrogators that protested. There were CIA officers and State Department people who resigned. Jena Haspel followed the orders. And so whether it is George Bush and Dick Cheney or it's Donald Trump, the track record of Jena Haspel is that she does what she's told, even if it's a heinous act of torture.
And what about the destruction of the videotapes? Explain what she did.
Well, first of all, Jena Haspel claimed in this hearing that there were 92 tapes and that it was 92 tapes of one individual. Jason Leopold, who is a BuzzFeed news journalist that has done really incredible work FOIAing information, he and Marcy Wheeler have tracked this stuff more than anyone else, said that it was tapes of two individuals. Jena Haspel claims that they had these recordings, that there was concern because the program, meaning the Extraordinary Rendition program and the Black Sites program, had started to seep out into the media. It was being reported on the Washington Post, New York Times, Cy Hirsch, other people. And they said, oh, well, we can't have these things leak because it's going to put at risk the agents in the field. And Haspel and her boss, Jose Rodriguez, who openly brags, he goes on his book tours and stuff, openly brags that he jump-started the torture program, said it worked, etc. Haspel was his deputy at the time that these tapes were ordered destroyed. And Haspel had to actually draft the memo for Jose Rodriguez. Now, her defenders portray it as though she was like Rodriguez's secretary and was doing, no, she was one of the people that ran the site where these tapes, were filmed. So, and she said openly in the hearing, which actually contradicted a lot of what her defenders said about her. She said she absolutely supported destroying the tapes. Now, and then she's asked during the hearing. Now, mind you, this is someone who is up for CIA director. She's asked, why didn't you preserve a copy of it in a secure way? Okay, we understand that that you wanted to destroy any tapes that may have been not held securely. Why didn't you preserve a copy? She says, oh, I'm not a technical person. Huh? You're not a technical person and you're going to be the director of the CIA? This is what I'm saying. This whole thing is a psyop against us.
Well, let's turn to Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein of California questioning Jena Haspel yesterday.
Were you an advocate for destroying the tapes?
Senator, I absolutely was an advocate if we could within and conforming to U.S. law, and if we could get policy concurrence to eliminate the security risk posed to our officers by those tapes, and the consistent legal
advice. And you were aware of what those tapes contained?
No, I never watched the tapes, but I understood that our officers' faces were on them and that was very dangerous at a time when there were unauthorized disclosures that were exposing the program.
But it also exposed how the program was conducted.
So that's Jena Haspel responding to questions by Feinstein. I wanted to ask, Jeremy, given what you said earlier about the history of the CIA and their not only participation in programs of torture, but also intervening in other countries, overthrowing various governments, whether anyone in the CIA would not be complicit in what Jena Haspel has been complicit in, or variations of the same. And then second, the point that Trump made about, waterboarding and worse. What about the fact that the CIA, for worse things than waterboarding, principally rendered, or as you say, kidnapped detainees and sent them to places like Syria, Iraq, Jordan, etc., where they knew the torture would be much more brutal?
Well, first of all, yes, there are people who worked in the CIA, a lot of people who worked in the CIA that I don't think you could say, oh, these people are responsible for torture. But even if we want to look at sort of, and I'll answer that question directly in a second, but even if you want to look at sort of grades of involvement, Jena Haspel's like at the top. She was one of the people who was running one of the early sites where the United States was doing this. So it's clear that the fact that she refuses to call it immoral or to say that the tactics that the senators were specifically citing was torture. She kept saying, well, we got this valuable information. It's a mystery. I don't know. Maybe it was attributable to that. Maybe it wasn't. But, in general, the CIA is divided into two big camps. I mean, there's lots of little nuance, but two big camps, the analytical side and the operations side. The operations side is sort of the dark side, the Dick Cheney view of it. Those are the people that were conducting the operations that Jena Haspel was involved with. Then you have people that are on the analytical side, and those were the people that the neocon said was like a liberal think tank. They would have been the people that were pushing back internally against, for instance, the information that was put in front of Colin Powell when he went to the United Nations to sell the Iraq war for the Bush administration. Ray McGovern, who was dragged out of that hearing and had his arm dislocated. This is a man who's almost 80 years old. Ray Mcgovern came out of the analytical division at the CIA. Glenn Carl, another person who was also a CIA interrogator, he actually was on the operations side, was against torture and spoke out about torture. So, I certainly don't mean to be heaping any praise on the CIA, but to directly answer your question, of course. And there were people that were very seriously protesting, including people who were in the same position as Jena Haspel after her, who were saying, this is not right.
What do you feel is a critical question that wasn't asked as we wrap up?
Well, I think that the Democrats should have shut the entire thing down and refused to participate anymore until Jena Haspel answered the question about, is waterboarding torture? And not get into some legalistic thing of what John Yoo, a man who would justify all manner of torture and say, well, anything short of killing them is not actually torture.
Who's at UC Berkeley Law School.
Ironically.
Look, Jay Bybee, federal judge.
Yes, also. I mean, they had all these... Exactly right. And, Hitler also had a lot of lawyers that could make things legal. And people say, oh, you're comparing the United States to Nazi Germany. No, they're doing it. They're doing it by using the very excuse that war criminals the world over attempt to use. So I think they should have pushed her on the idea that, do you think that just doing your job is an excuse? Your conscience plays no role in this? Have you ever heard of a conscientious objection? But the fact, and I think John McCain, as discredited as he is on a lot of issues, the man was tortured and understands this issue and has made the point that the United States prosecuted Japanese war criminals for doing these same things. His point was good. It is totally disqualifying, no matter what you think, if you're a Republican, Democrat, not to say that was immoral.
And she gets to classify or declassify the document. She's in charge of the CIA right now, right? Acting director.
She is. And I also, and the other point, I mean, look, this was all they talked about yesterday for the most part. This and then, Marco Rubio and others sort of saying, oh, we love the CIA and you're all so great. They didn't talk about any other issues. Jena Haspel at one point mentions the relationship between the Joint Special Operations Command and the CIA has never been closer. I mean, to me, the elephant in the room of all of this is that the CIA and the U.S. military's darkest elements, they're in a golden era right now. I mean, Trump is an ideal person for them. All this stuff about the deep states trying to destroy Trump, establishment neocons hate the man, but they love what's going on right now. And unfortunately, they're in an alliance increasingly with liberals.
Jeremy Scahill, I want to thank you for being with us, co-founder of The Intercept, host of the weekly podcast Intercepted, author of Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army, Dirty Wars, The World as a Battlefield, and The Assassination Complex. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we'll talk about a new book that is out. We'll talk about one Syrian's experience of the Syrian war, Brothers of the Gun, a memoir of the Syrian war. And we'll be joined by Molly Crabapple. Stay with us.